And right now, I am very pleased to introduce our presenter for this evening, Gary Meltzer, who is my MBWR colleague from Georgetown, Ontario. Gary is a regular participant here on Wednesday and brings 2 decades of experience as a mindfulness practitioner. He is a facilitator for the Center's mindfulness-based wellness and resiliency program for correctional staff in the province of Ontario, Canada. Gary has also been a volunteer for the Freeing the Human Spirit, a prison yoga and meditation program since 2009, where Gary's been going in with his colleagues into incarcerated secure facilities and providing this sort of support and training. So thank you for sharing your practice tonight, Gary, and your expertise. We look forward to your presentation.
Thank you very much, John and Robert and everybody for coming. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we begin. I always like to make sure that we set the stage properly with guidelines and precepts, because some of the material I'll be going over tonight has a tendency to maybe be triggering for some folks, and I want to acknowledge that in advance. And the way we deal with this is we practice self-care. It's your practice. It's all invitational, and it's optional. You don't have to engage in anything that might feel uncomfortable. And as always, the instruction is if you did feel something that wasn't right, you can step in or out of a practice. I try to do my best to practice trauma-sensitive speech. That's my job, but I don't know everyone. I don't know everyone's history, and we're all neurodiverse. These are 2 very popular topics right now. So self-care has to be downloaded to the people who are listening. So please be gentle with yourself. And I'm not a doctor or a therapist, and this is not in any way intended to replace or substitute for professional care. And there is tons of it out there, so please understand that as well. We're going to begin with a practice which is basically out of the Buddhist tradition, Tibetan probably in nature, but it's from Thupten Jinpa, and it's part of the compassion cultivation training that's offered. It's a practice called Just Like Me. And what I'd like you to do is find a position for sitting. We'll begin with sitting. And just however it's comfortable for you, if you need to move from your chair or lie down or whatever works for you standing. And we want a nice, comfortable, dignified posture, not rigid, but not collapsed. And begin by just the grounding sensation. Feel your body in the chair, feel your feet on the ground, and begin to allow the awareness to move inward, just riding the waves of the breath. Take a few nice cleansing breaths. Ground yourself with the breath. Settle down. Settle down the mind. And this is going to be a series of contemplations. And the first contemplation is to bring to mind a neutral person, someone who you may know to look at, but you don't know anything about their history. They may be somebody from a local business or store. So bring them to mind and invite the contemplation. Just like me, this person wishes to be happy, to not have suffering, to be loved and to feel safe. This person wishes to find joy and meaning, just like me. Rest your mind on this universal fact. And take a breath, and we'll move on from a neutral person to a difficult person, someone you might have some difficulty or aversion with, not your archenemy, just somebody who maybe if you think of them, there's a little discomfort. But just like me, this person wishes to be happy, to not have suffering, to be loved, and to feel safe. This person wishes to find joy and meaning, just like me. And we'll release this part of the contemplation and expand the circle to everyone in our neighborhood. And hold that contemplation that, just like me, these people wish to be happy, to not have suffering, to be loved and feel safe. These people wish to find joy and meaning just like me. And we'll breathe into that contemplation and let it go. And now we'll expand it even more to include everyone on the planet, all 8 billion of us. And just like me, everyone wishes to be happy, to not have suffering, to be loved and to feel safe. Everyone wishes to find joy and meaning, just like me. And for a few moments, rest your mind on the contemplation of our common humanity. May all beings find happiness and be free from suffering. So take a nice deep cleansing breath once again. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes. If you need to do a little movement, that's fine, you can do it. And I will continue to just motor on because there's a lot of material here. And I want to try and get as much of it covered as possible. And just, I'm offering a perspective. We're not going to be able to go deep in, it's titled Post-Traumatic Growth and Forgiveness, Pathways to Liberation. And I'm going to try and tie these little things together with a few other concepts, but it's more just to introduce these ideas. And then I already sent them to you, Robert. I have the resources for the meditations and for the material that I basically focused on and the practices. So you don't have to take notes or anything. This will all be easy to access in a day or so. So the practice, just like me, acknowledge it, is our universal wish for happiness and to be free from suffering. This is our common humanity, and Jimpa, Thupten Jimpa, refers to it as our common humanity. And if we go, and this is coming from a Buddhist tradition, it is said that the Buddha is quoted as saying this. I wasn't around at that time, but the Buddha is, all of this stuff may be mythology, but it's how it's passed down and the teachings come to us through other people. So I'm only reiterating what has been said. But the Buddhist quote is saying, I only teach one thing, suffering and the end of suffering. And this is what's going to be sort of the theme that we're going to repeat throughout this little presentation, is suffering and the end of suffering, post-traumatic growth. What is post-traumatic growth different from? It's different from post-traumatic stress. Post-traumatic stress, I think, could be very easily considered suffering, and growth would be the end of suffering. So what I did in the beginning is I outlined, and I put a very brief link in my resources for the Four Noble Truths. I'm sure everybody's heard of them, and if they haven't heard of them, they probably have been introduced to parts of them. And I'm not here to go into detail on them, but just to repeat them outward. The first noble truth of the Buddha was there is suffering, and often called unsatisfactoriness. The second noble truth is there's a cause, there's causality. Generally, in the Buddhist tradition, it's called craving, but we're modern people. That was 2,500 years ago. There's more reasons for the cause of our suffering today. The third is the possibility for the end of suffering. The third noble truth is there's a possibility for cessation. And the fourth noble truth from the Buddha is a path which leads to the end of suffering. And they usually say wise or right. I'm just going to repeat the eight things just as right. So there's right view, right thought, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. And as I began, just as we do these trauma-sensitive practices, that has to do with right speech and right action. So we're already working with the Buddha's teachings, whether we're realizing it or not. I want to throw some definitions here very quickly because we have to start somewhere. So what is trauma? And I'm going to give credit to Google for these things. A deeply distressing or disturbing experience. And we know what that is. We've all experienced this is our common humanity. We've all experienced some form of dissatisfaction or suffering or trauma. Post-traumatic growth, on the other hand, is a positive psychological change experienced as a result of struggling with a highly challenging, highly stressful life experience. So if we get challenged and we have the psychological change that moves us from that, that's post-traumatic growth. And post-traumatic stress, on the other hand, is a condition that develops in some people, not everybody, and not everybody experiences post-traumatic growth. But it happens in some people who've experienced a shocking, scary, dangerous event, or a disturbing, distressing, stressful, all of these words, we're going to play with semantics here, all of these words are pointing at the same thing. Now, what's interesting about post-traumatic stress is it was originally put in the DSM, the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, as in 1980. So all of a sudden in 1980, just recently, we now have a name for this condition. The condition has been going on since man existed on the planet, but the research came up in the 80s, and then all of a sudden we had a label for it. And they originally called it post-traumatic stress disorder, and I pay homage to Robert here because he was the one who mentioned that now in the therapeutic field, there's a movement to change the wording from PTSD to PTSI, change the word disorder to injury, because disorder has stigma attached to it. Again, we're getting to right speech now and trauma-sensitive languaging. Disorder sounds like something, I'm broken, I'm never going to be fixed, it could be forever. But post-traumatic stress injury means I've got a wound, but that wound can heal, and it destigmatizes the language. So this is interesting. Post-traumatic growth is a theory that explains the positive transformation and growth which can occur after trauma. It was developed by Richard Tedeschi and Lawrence Calhoun in the mid-90s. So they're credited with creating this term. Post-traumatic growth has been going on as long as man has been on this planet. We've all suffered injury. That's the first noble truth. We suffer. Well, why do we suffer? Because we live in these fragile human bodies. They're vulnerable, and we're going to all experience aging, sickness, and death. So post-traumatic growth, people who have overcome adversity, they've been doing it forever. What we're going to touch on is just this notion of, is there a way to encourage it? Is it innate? Is it acquired? And what ways, what modalities might help us? Tedeschi and Lawrence Calhoun are where I got most of what I'm speaking about, and I put a link to an interview with Richard Tedeschi where he explains virtually everything I'm saying. That will be in the resources. Post-traumatic growth it begins with uncertainty, that we move from trauma to transformation. And it's not a one-shot deal. It's not like you got a headache, you take an aspirin, that's the end of headaches. No, it's a lifetime engagement. And we need help. All of us need help. So with the help of mentorship, learning, professional help, good doctors, good programs, and we need that to eliminate the fear and negativity. One approach is there are seven stages, and it's called the traveler's journey. And the place we begin, and you'll hear this in other trainings, is we first identify our North Star. And the North Star in this would be, what would your life be like without hindrances, without these hindrances, which is traumatic experience, the memory of trauma. What would your life be without that? That's your North Star. That's where you start. And then this 7 stages of what's called the traveler's journey is, first we relax, and this is almost like the introduction to a meditation. Establish your foundation. The second is focus, create stability and groundedness. The third is trust. Be your own teacher. The fourth is savor, and we had Dr. Eric Garland. He mentioned savoring in his MORE program a little while for who was here. Everybody knows Rick Hansen talks about taking in the good or savoring. So this is not a new concept for anybody. The fifth is connect. The sixth is acceptance. And the seventh is going deeper, a relational aspect. And I just want to throw in well, I'll save that for after this last piece. In Richard Tedeschi's and Lawrence Calhoun's research, they found 5 common factors, and this is interesting. Factors or domains that were common in the expression of PTG, post-traumatic growth. And this was from their research. They collected all of the, let's say, self-report from all of the people that they studied who said that they had experienced this post-traumatic growth. And these are the 5 areas or domains factors or domains that they identified from their research. One is personal strength. And people noticed that they were stronger than they thought they were. Second is appreciation of life. People felt more gratitude. The third is they discovered new possibilities. The fourth, people recognize changes in their interpersonal relationships. So, their life was shifting and they noticed this. And the fifth, people noticed spiritual and existential growth. So a connection with their higher power, their God, whatever their religious or spiritual beliefs were. And they started to contemplate some of the big questions like, why do we suffer? Or what does this all mean? So this is where their research was leading, and these are some of the findings. It would be impossible for me to even cover this in a very deep way, but they threw this quote in as well, and I thought it was useful. It's from Helen Keller, and I think everybody knows who Helen Keller was. We focus on the doors that are closed and can't see the ones that are open. So I'll say that again. We focus on the doors that are closed and we can't see the ones that are opened. And this is probably where we find our hang-ups, really, where we get stuck in the negativity bias, like Rick Hansen says, and we can't get to that savoring space or recognizing the good. We got the Velcro for negative experience and Teflon for positive experience. So what I want to do at this point is that was just an introduction as a just so we can touch into it, get some sense of the terrain. And I'd like to ask, we're going to go into short breakout rooms. We'll do dyads in 5 minutes, 2.5 minutes apiece, and just try and share a little bit. And I have 2 prompts here, and John will put them up. And the first prompt for post-traumatic growth is, can you recognize a situation where you've experienced post-traumatic growth? And how did it affect your life? And there's a caution that I throw in here, and it always must be stated. Do not identify the trauma. Don't identify the event that caused some discomfort or pain. But notice if you've grown from something, And then how did it change your life? So when you're ready, John, you can set up and open up the breakout rooms.
They didn't let us chalk anymore.
Got to remember that you come back muted. Welcome back. What I'd like to do now is just, if there's something that came up, and I'm going to try and leave a space at the end for open sharing. So if someone has a comment or something came up that they want to share, we'll save that because we're going to do the second part of the program, which is forgiveness. I will try and tie a few things together if there's time, and then we'll do a final breakout room and then come back to open sharing. The second part I chose was forgiveness. And to me, there's a bit of a correlation between post-traumatic growth and forgiveness. They have some similar qualities, and they're not easy. So what I do, and I'm going to do a meditation after sort of an explanation of the terrain first, because I think it's important that we get a little bit of an idea of the landscape before you go into a practice like this. And again, I emphasize always that there's the potential for some very triggering contemplations here, and you have to be gentle and practice self-care. I'll say that again, I'm sure, before it's done. But in a forgiveness practice, and I'm going to take this from Jack Kornfield again. That's going to be in the resources. But Jack Kornfield is the one that introduced it the way I do it. I also included one from Stephen Levine, which is a much longer one. And again, I'm abbreviating everything to try and squeeze it in to leave room for us to share at the end. So the forgiveness practice has basically three major components. There, first is asking for forgiveness. The second component is forgiving yourself. And the third component is forgiving others. And I'm going to break those down a little bit here in discussion, and then we'll do a little bit of a practice just to get a sense of what that practice entails. So forgiveness has three elements to it. When we ask for forgiveness, we first have to understand that throughout our lives, by our common humanity, just by our flawed nature and by the fact that we all make mistakes, we've said or done something to others to cause them pain. And it's not as though we are always on a path where we're going, I want to hurt that person. A lot of it is unintentional. So let's just break this down or unpack it a bit. So how do we hurt others? We hurt others through our actions, of course, through our speech, or even our thoughts. And a lot of people go, well, how do you hurt anybody with your thoughts? Well, if you look at it, everything begins with a thought. You know, that jerk, he should slip and fall on the ice, or, you know, somebody cuts you off on the road and I hope he gets in an accident. All of a sudden there's a thought in the mind. The next thing is you'll roll down the window and say something derogatory out the window. And then the third thing, you're playing bumper cars on the highway with road rage. So the thought begets the speech, and the speech begets the action. In Buddhism, they refer to it as a karmic seed. Thought is the karmic seed for speech or actions, but thoughts is the karmic seed for speech, and speech is the karmic seed for an action. So there's kind of a chain of command going on there. So we hurt each other through our thoughts, our speech, or our actions. And then there's two reasons or two main streams of why you would hurt another person. And I'll explain it in a little bit of detail. But one is, in the Buddhist tradition, is referred to as ignorance. And it doesn't mean you didn't do good on your SATs, or you weren't getting good grades in class, or you don't know anything. It has to do with the fact that you can't predict what your actions will set in motion. And ignorance is common. It's common to all of us. When we do things, we can't always predict what the outcomes will be. That's known as ignorance. And often we don't even consider them. We don't think, oh, geez, I wonder what will happen if I say this. When my wife asks me, how do I look in this dress? You know, we can't always predict how that response is going to go. So we're in some very sensitive areas. But because of our inability to predict, we may hurt someone inadvertently. There's no intention involved. But you have to remember, if I feel dismissed or I feel ignored, if I feel that pain, I feel it. It doesn't matter if there was any intent involved. The pain is real. And that's what we have done throughout our lives to other people, whether we knew it or not, whether it was intention, whether it was, however it came down, we're still acknowledging that we're the source of someone else's pain. So the first part of asking forgiveness is having to do with that acknowledgement. The second way we hurt others is through our own pain. And this is a little bit more detailed, but if somebody just lost a loved one or got fired from their job or had an accident on the way home from work or hurt themselves and something happened, their own trauma or their own physical pain, they're going to be reactive. We're not, when I walk in the house and I had a crappy day and I had a fight with the boss and my wife says, take out the garbage, that's a trigger. She doesn't realize what a crappy day I had, but it is the source of, the hurt that I'm going to feel, right? So we get into these situations, or I could turn around and say something and snap back at her from my own pain. The example I like to use is a little bit more neutral. Your neighbor's dog is a loving dog. He licks you all the time. You played with him all, 10 years. He always is friendly. You walk up one day, and now the dog's in his later years, and his hips are bad, and he's got pain in his hindquarters. And you go, hey, Rover, you pat him on the back of and bites your hand. The dog bites you out of its pain, not because it's not a friendly dog or a loving dog or it wants to hurt you. So just play with that idea that we hurt others out of our own pain, and that's because we're reactive. We don't have the ability to respond. We have a reactive thing that goes on, and it causes pain to the other person. Then we move to forgiving ourselves, and this is interesting because if you listen to the work of Kristen Neff and Christopher Germer of Mindful Self-Compassion, or you work with the work of Brene Brown called The Work, where, she says, you ask yourself, is this true? I'm an idiot. How did I do that? Why would I have said that? This self-talk, this self-critical voice that's condemning us from inside. We hear the voice. We make a mistake, and you go, how could you be such an idiot? Why? You always do that. Why don't you take your time? So we have this inner dialogue that's sometimes really brutal, and it's ripping us apart. So when we get into forgiving ourselves, that self-forgiveness is recognizing that we can do harm. There's an inner voice that some people fall into self-abuse or self-destructive behaviors. There's a whole series. So that's a little bit more simple to explain. And the last piece is the most difficult, and that's the one that you have to be the most sensitive with. If someone has hurt you badly in your life or done something horrible recently, this is not the time to do a practice where you even consider what forgiveness means. When you're raw and it's right now, there must be space for healing. And that healing comes with time. So in no way do you even go into any of these contemplations. Again, don't pick your worst situation or your arch enemy. You just understand what the framework is, or what the landscape looks like when you go into a practice of forgiveness. And when you go to the third part, it's forgiving others for the injustices that you've incurred as a result of them. The verbal, physical, mental, whatever. We know, we don't have to define all of it. We already know what all of that entails. But one of the pieces of forgiving others has in a way, has less to do about condoning actions. It has nothing to do with condoning actions. An unholy, unconscionable act, people are in prison for that kind of stuff. There's laws against it, but it doesn't stop the fact that many people have been the victim of that. But we're not condoning any behavior whatsoever. We're merely, if we're big enough and strong enough and work a lot with compassion, we might get to a place where we go, I wonder what horror that being had to incur in their lives, what sort of pain and suffering they incurred for them to act in such an unconscionable way. Now, maybe someone will get to that place. I'm not suggesting you try to go there. I'm just saying that that's the flip side where you understand the human condition and how some people act inappropriately because of the inappropriateness of the life that they've incurred. And it's tricky stuff, so please be gentle with this. And one other part of this, which is important, is we have a grievance against somebody. There's anger, there's hatred, there's a desire for retribution. When we're the victim of some sort of injustice, it can be very, very powerful. But what's happening? When this event is going on, who's suffering? Who's the one who's dysregulated and struggling? It's me, because I am holding on to my grievances. And I'm the one who's suffering as a result. The person's name comes into my mind or image, or they walk through the street, or whatever happens. And we realize that we're creating a prison of our own. There's a prison created of our own creation. We're the ones that are actually making this and keeping it alive through our own inability to let it be or let it go, or to come to a place of forgiveness, which is liberating us. So that's the groundwork. Now we're going to do a short practice, just a meditative practice that includes some of this. And I emphasize again, be gentle. Don't go to any dark places. If you have to step out or open your eyes or just substitute, you can use another word, another idea, or different language, however that works. So I want to invite you to come into a nice seated posture again. Become aware of the way you sit and bring that awareness back in. And we're going to use the breath again to kind of settle us and bring us into the present moment. Bring the awareness into the body a bit with the breath. And notice if there's any tension already building up inside the body. But on the exhalation, see if you can release it and let it go. If there is any holding anywhere, any tightness. Just come into the body with the breath. And we want to begin with the contemplation of asking for forgiveness. Recognizing that we've caused harm or pain to others through our actions, our speech, or our thoughts, whether knowingly or unknowingly. There need not be any intent. We ask for forgiveness. We recognize the pain and discomfort that another has incurred as a result of our behavior. And in this moment, we take responsibility for that. These beings may not be in our presence at the moment, they may not be part of our lives, and they may have passed on. But if a memory comes up of something that we've created, there could be some pain and woundedness that we feel for that being. And it's our wish to ask for forgiveness, to say, I'm sorry, to feel that sense of remorse. There may even be some shame. So just acknowledging this and breathing in and out with these sensations that are associated with this May I be forgiven. May I be forgiven. Breathe in and out. And then I want you to release this part of the contemplation, and then we'll move on to self-forgiveness. Recognizing how we may have been unkind to ourselves through our actions or speech or our thought. How we've been non-accepting of things that we've done, of things we've set in motion. How there's been an inner dialogue that has been unkind, very judgmental, very self-critical. And we want to move away from the self-critical voice, accepting the fact that we're human, that we make mistakes, and that's part of nature, that's part of our being. And can we move to a place of self-acceptance, self-love, self-forgiveness? May I practice self-forgiveness. And breathe in with these sensations. Breathe in, soften, let them go. And then we'll let go of this part of the contemplation, and we'll move to the final contemplation, unforgiving others. Recognizing the pain that we've incurred from another being through their actions, their speech, or their thoughts, whether there was any intention, whether it was knowable or unknowable. It doesn't matter. The pain we felt was the pain we felt. It was real. We felt dismissed, disregarded, demeaned, violated. Whatever that was, we felt it. And in this moment, we try to come to a place where we can lay down our arms, where we can see how destructive our grievances, our anger, our hatred and retribution, how that affects us. We've been traveling through our lives in a prison of our own creation. It's like carrying a heavy weight through life, or having a ball and chain wrapped around your leg. We in no way condone an unholy act. But we recognizing the flawed nature that we're all capable of. And for us to release our grievances, to lay down our arms, may be difficult. This may not be the time. It may be too fresh, too new, too raw. But in time, and maybe we need the help of a professional, a therapist, somebody to help us work through these very difficult mind states. But the ultimate goal is to a place of letting go, letting be. May we find a place of forgiveness. May we find the freedom and liberation that comes with this. May we find a place of forgiveness. May there be peace. May there be peace. May there be peace. And just breathe and let it go. Breathe in, let it go. Breathe in and just let it go. And when you're ready, release this contemplation completely. Maybe take a few more deep cleansing breaths. And when you're ready, you can gently open your eyes, come back to the room. And what I'd like to do now is to offer another breakout room. Can you identify a place where forgiveness might be helpful? How do you think it might affect your life? Or have you experienced a place of forgiveness? Have you forgiven someone? And what was that effect? So we're going to go into another breakout, dyads again for 2.5 minutes a person, and then we'll come back and then we'll close. John. Okay, we're back. I see we're at 8:58, and I'm trying to honor everything like I'm supposed to. And, it took a bit more time, as it always does, than I had expected. But I just want to open it up. Instead of me trying to consolidate everything, I'm done. I'd like to hear if anybody has anything that they feel they need to share. No obligation.
I would speak out to the fact that I I think we're getting better, and I feel like the conversations that I had, you know, I feel the statement of things are getting better, things are getting not necessarily easier, but more accepted is very good, and things like this that you're doing, and thank you very much for doing it, are helping us move in the right direction in both growth for ourselves and resilience.
Thanks, Philip. And resilience and post-traumatic growth, I think, are interchangeable. It's all degrees, but I'm glad you put that word in there if I didn't mention it. Anybody else, for sure.
Well, I think one of the things that we talked about that was really insightful for me was forgiveness is not simple. And there can be many different components, some that we are aware of in that process of forgiveness and some that we're not. And for the act of forgiving, whether it's yourself or someone else, is incredibly introspective and insightful. And the insight may not come for a long time after. We kind of talked a little bit about that in our first session too, is that we may gain insight, but the manifestation of that may be years down the road.
Thanks, Sherry. Anybody else?
Yeah, I would say, Gary, I mean, I shared some things with you, but just with the others hearing, I think it's such I think it's such an important topic in our life, because many people have inner critic voices, and we work in environments sometimes. So I know you had a lot of stuff to get through, but I really had a sense of your energy on the topic, and I think that really came through, and it would make me want to go and read more or listen more, and so you may not have gotten to everything, but I thought that's a great thing. That's a good thing to say, I believe, because there is so much to say, and that's a good message, actually. Yeah, all good.
Thank you, John.
Yes, you did have a lot to cover in the hour, but you did it in a way that didn't seem hurried and did provide some insights and food for thought that I think is going to continue to percolate I know with me personally, and the additional resources you're sharing, I'll see that everybody gets.
Thank you, Robert. I want to make one comment, and this is going to affect everyone who's here and those who are not. I also had a list, which I wrote down, and I was writing down just from memory, the various programs and modalities, Sherry, EMDR. When I wrote the word pathways in there, what I wanted to get to, if I ever got there, was to say these are just two areas to consider. You do the research, you do the homework on yourself, but you could go to EMDR, MBWR, you could go to MBSR, MBCT. I wrote down a million different things that are very popular. And it's just to say that there are many ways, but there's plenty of resources for us. And I think that was inherent in the fact of the work that Robert's doing and John's doing and everyone on the screen is doing. And I appreciate it. I'm honored to be able to present. And Robert, whether you know it or not, Robert and I had a conversation a year ago, and I said, if I ever do another program, I would like to do one on forgiveness. And he said, maybe you could tie in forgiveness with post-traumatic growth. And that's what I did. So this is for you, Robert. Believe me. And then once I got into PTG, I realized, whoa, the floodgates are open, and I can't even let you know how much research and how much reading and how much more there was. But thank you, and I know I'm already over time.
Well, thank you, Gary. Thank you for all your efforts. And it was really beautifully presented, very thoughtful, thought-provoking for myself as well. And I'm glad that we're able to share this as a video when it gets completed. So thank you so much. And I'm sure we'll ask you back and have you back. And yeah, thank you for sharing your wisdom and all of the research that you've done.
Everybody be well until we meet again. Thank you, Gary.
Take good care, everybody.